Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Syracuse Football Postgame. It is presented by Kraus Health. Those of you joining us live on Facebook and our Syracuse Orange Sports YouTube page after an Orange crusher, Syracuse falls to Florida State 33-30 is the final score in Tallahassee. So the Orange fall to 3-2 on the season. Florida State gets off the schneid and gets its first win of the 2021 season. It was a back and forth slugfest between Syracuse and Florida State. Breaks going on each side of the ball, but ultimately Syracuse gets the biggest bad break of the game at the end. And look, we're going to get into this here. There was a bad no call at the end of that game. Let's just get it out there now. That no call on Marlowe Wax was brutal. How that doesn't get called, it sets up a play by Jordan Travis of Florida State. He gets inside the 10-yard line for Florida State, sets up the winning field goal. If that's a hold, it knocks Florida State back. There's only less than 20 seconds to go in the game. Who knows what happens from there? And at least we go to overtime here and settle this thing. I'm not the biggest fan of college football overtime, to be honest with you, but you go in and you settle it on the field as it should be. For officials to settle games like this, in a way, because Syracuse had plenty of other opportunities here, don't get me wrong, it is really frustrating. And I think that needs to be put out there. Okay. This could be a game that comes back to really haunt you at the end. This could be the difference between 5-7 and 6-6. This could be the difference between, frankly, Dino Babers being rehired or not, if it comes down to it, and John Wildhack's got to make a decision about his record. There's plenty more ACC play to go here, but now you get Wake Forest at the Carrier Dome next week, who's 5-0. They had a hell of a game today with Louisville, and they're the class of the ACC. So you got to step up big and beat the best team in the ACC after losing to the worst team in the ACC today. You give Florida State that win. Garrett Schrader, I got to tell you, folks, I was wrong. Andy says it here in the comments. Brent, we have a quarterback. I got to give Schrader credit. And timing is everything in life, right? The offense is stalling. Nothing's happening. Ball's not moving. It looks like Florida State has creeped in. They figured out the Syracuse offense. They cannot throw the football. I said it. I actually said that Syracuse should put Tommy DeVito in the game to try and get the passing game going. Well, Garrett Schrader proved me wrong there. He held on to the starting spot today and proved that maybe he was the right decision ultimately to be the starting quarterback. He goes on a 55-yard touchdown run after that, made some tough runs throughout the game, over 100 yards on the day for Schrader. Rushing, we'll give you the full stats here momentarily. He made enough throws in this game. He showed now the play down the stretch to Quealy was wide open, and there were throws out there that he'd like to have back, but certainly proved that he can move the chains. Once they switched into the play action a little bit and let Schrader throw on the run, that offense they were calling in the first half was absolutely brutal. And I don't know why they weren't utilizing Schrader in that way, but they fixed the mistake is the important thing. And now I think they've got a handle on what Schrader can do throwing and running the football. He's obviously an asset running the ball, had a huge run in the fourth quarter to set up a touchdown. But, man, this was just a game of back and forth, just breaks all around. Florida State gets a 65-yard run that sets up a touchdown. Syracuse punter James Williams could not make the trip to this game, so special teams was a concern, and you had a backup punter come in and shank a punt, which leads to a Florida State score. There were mistakes all around on both sides, but that was it. You had two teams just trading blows here. Sean Tucker had to tough out over 100 yards, nowhere near what it was in the past couple of games for him, and getting those big breakaway runs. He really had to grind. There was a shot in the fourth quarter that they showed on the ACC network, and he was just spent, just absolutely spent at the end of the game. So it's a tough one to take for Syracuse because one way or the other, you got to beat Florida State. But look, this was a Florida State team that was desperate, that was going to do everything it could, that got Travis back on the field. I don't know if Syracuse was expecting that. I think they were preparing more for Mackenzie Milton than Jordan Travis. That was a surprise to some people that Travis was back out there. His mobility really shined for Florida State. I think the Syracuse defense, played bend but don't break. This was a tough game for them. They got a few tackles and misplays they'd like back, but ultimately, Marlowe Act and Michael Jones make a big stop with about 3.5 minutes to go. Deuce Chestnut with that incredible interception, that diving play. Just what a player he's turning into for Syracuse in a big moment, in a big spot. But ultimately, Syracuse can't put it home. Florida State gets the ball last. They get a huge benefit from a no call, a clear hold that ACC officials have got to make, and they have just been brutal all year long, and officials in general have had some bad calls. And if I was Dino Babers, I would have pulled a Greg Schiano. I would have just went out there and flipped out and got ejected from the game. I mean, you got to be on the field, obviously, in case something weird happens and Florida State misses that kick. We've certainly seen that in the past, and you got to go into overtime. But just absolutely brutal no call at the end there. But look, bottom line, you got to beat Florida State, especially when it became a close game, and Syracuse got a number of breaks that went its way. So we'll see if this comes back to haunt them. Margaret asked there, where were a couple of those guys? Taj Harris did not make the trip to Florida. Neither did James Williams. Jahad Carter was injured. We know that. We're not sure about why Williams and Harris were not there. Their status was not declared. Chris Elmore was back out there today for Syracuse after a mysterious 4-game suspension, if you will, from the team. But, we've heard this story before, unfortunately, for Taj Harris. So we'll see how that goes going forward here, if that was injury-related or not. Blake says, Brent, you need a flag for the post game to throw. The refs won't throw one on the last run. 76, a blatant hold. They only threw it on wax for a late touch on the quarterback. Look, I could not agree more. I mean, there's just no way around that. Go watch that replay. It is a brutal no call, right in full view of the officials, let alone the 17 replays that we get of it at home, right? But you can't miss that call. I'm sorry, you can't. You have got to call that, right? It's like in hockey, they don't call a penalty unless in the playoffs, it was just absolutely egregious. Well, that's what that call was. How do you not call that, right? So I think Syracuse fans and Syracuse in general have every right to be upset about that. I'm sure Dino is not going to go there. He learned his lesson in the past, and certainly was measured in his comments about the officiating and Greg Schiano not getting the personal foul call and he getting that in the Rutgers game. But that was a brutal situation there officiating wise. But as Andy says, Garrett clearly is what this team needs. Will only get better. DeVito got 3 years to prove his worth. Andy, I think you're right about that, because look, the Syracuse offense under Babers, and not just under Babers, go back to Donovan McNabb, go back to Marvin Graves, go back to, Donnie McPherson and a few other names we can throw out there, right? Thrives when you have a quarterback that can run and can throw and can give you options there. Tommy DeVito is clearly a pocket quarterback and can run the ball, but certainly can't bounce off defenders and kind of give you these big chunk plays that Garrett Schrader can. It's incredible how Schrader woke up, though. Rutgers game, you got a taste of it. Albany game, what do you get from that? It's Albany, right? Last week, of course, against Liberty, it was a very physical ground and pound game plan. He goes 6 of 15 for 77 yards throwing the ball, and we still just didn't have a sense of what he could do as a complete quarterback. As I noted, right up until that moment when he had that 55-yard touchdown run and finally broke through, this was an offense that was stalled, was predictable, was stale. Dino Babers had a number of clock management issues in this game, blew a timeout in the first half, called 2 timeouts down the stretch. Now, there was a little bit of a disagreement there. The refs, I think, reset the play clock, and there was 1 timeout they should have had back. But clearly, time management was not his friend today, because you get into the second half, he blows a timeout with, I think, 4.5 to go in the third quarter. You can't burn those timeouts, and it turned out to be a close game, and Syracuse needed every timeout they could get there. The 4th down calls that Syracuse had, you had a 4th down play, and all these points add up, right? Syracuse missed an extra point, rare mistake there by Andre Schmidt, and there's a 4th down play. They go into shotgun. Why you go into shotgun is beyond me. You have Garrett Schrader, you have a huge running back, hurry to the line, boom, run it through, quarterback sneak, Tom Brady style. I just don't understand why they line up in shotgun, because they did it again on a 4th and goal. Timeout, come out, and do the same play in shotgun. No, get up to the line and bruise it in. Now, that's what they did on the next possession because Syracuse got the ball back after Florida State had a punt, and then they did Garrett Schrader just bullet in there, right? So there's still some things about Babers that I think people are really frustrated with and should be in some sense. Clock management's an issue. Play calling on fourth down. I agreed with going for it on fourth down in that one situation where they didn't take the points and kick the field goal. And, who knows, that could have resulted in the game swinging another way. But you got to make the right call in those situations, right? Charlie says on the good side, we have a quarterback and he's going to get better. Thomas says the refs wanted Florida State to win it more today. It's that simple. R. Scott says, yep, says it all right there. Didn't like the officiating. Nick notes that seems like Dungy's senior year, Dino tried keeping Eric in the pocket, didn't look good, and brought Tommy in. Same thing with Garrett, doesn't look good in the pocket. Then when they let him outside the pocket, he's a different quarterback. And Nick, that is a fantastic point right there, because Schrader seems to be more comfortable when he throws on the run, when he's in play action, which they didn't do for like the first quarter and a half, which was puzzling. A number of people on social media were noting that, but when they went to it, he was a different quarterback. He was comfortable. He found his sea legs, not only running the ball, but he made some good throws, and they gave him time. And Darius Tisdale got hurt in the fourth quarter, so we'll see how that turns out. Obviously, this was a Syracuse offensive line that just went through a number of injury issues in the past couple of years, so that's the last thing they need at this point. But I think Schrader proved he's the quarterback today. I talked to Tommy DeVito on my radio show Thursday, and, he described the situation last week. He learns 2 hours before game time against Liberty who the starter is, and just kind of going through the emotions of that. Some emotional conversations with Dino on Sunday after that Friday night win over Liberty. And for a minute there, it was looking like Schrader wasn't the right permanent call, and you had to put in somebody that can throw the football. And honestly, I still have some concerns about Schrader if he gets in a situation where he's got to throw the football, like consistently. Sean Tucker gets shut down, teams pick up on him running the ball, and he's got to sling it. I still have some concerns there, but you make the best of what you have. And Schrader just brings you more assets on the field. Just bottom line, right? I was wrong about that. I was dead wrong about that. I mean, literally the moment I tweet that. You're welcome, Garrett. He goes out there and starts slinging it and played much better. So that is the good news there. I think that's a good comment that you have there. As Kevin notes here, this is obviously a system that needs a running quarterback, and that's just what you need in college football these days, right? You look at a lot of the successful quarterbacks out there, and that's what they are. Trevor Lawrence, number 1 overall pick. I think most people think of him as kind of a pocket quarterback, but he could move. He could get out there and extend some plays with his legs. And, look at Zach Wilson, big arm, but can run. Look at Justin Fields, had a rough day against Cleveland last week, but Chicago Bears fans are very excited about him. I mean, that's what you need in college football these days. And it certainly marks the Syracuse system better. Rob here, always some good comments from our friend Rob. And he says, Florida State just wanted it more. Make no mistake, Marlowe Axe was held. The defense didn't play to the whistle on 2 key plays that basically cost them. The backward pass recovered for the touchdown, and when Travis faked going out of bounds and into the red zone, following what should have been a flag for a holding. 2 good points there for Rob. Let's go back to the lateral play. Just one of those breaks of the game that went Florida State's way. That's awareness. You got to know that. And in that case, Simmons was near the ball. That was a fumble that Syracuse hops on, and that's one less score for Florida State. Right? You got to know that. That's not an incomplete pass. That's a lateral. That's a fumble. Just fall on the ball. No matter what, fall on the ball. Right? Even if you're not sure, just fall on the football and get it back. That was a huge swing, but this game was full of swings. This was back and forth throughout the game in this one. Scott says that may be the game that we look back and say, with that win, we sneak into a bowl game. I hope I'm wrong. I'm wrong a lot. Same here, Scott. But you are, I think, on the right path potentially about that. Could be the difference between 5-7 and 6-6, right? This is an ACC slate that gets Wake Forest next week. Not going to be easy for Syracuse by any stretch of the imagination. And, go through them. I'm not going in order here, but I'll pull up the schedule while we're talking about it so we can go through it here. And obviously the season changes based on injuries and all sorts of things that can swing the momentum of a season. But just to kind of look at it as we know it on the surface here, there's a big difference between 4-1 and 3-2, for Syracuse football. 4-1 is, I mean, that's golden if you're Syracuse, especially trying to get back to a bowl game. The over-under total on Syracuse before the season was 3 wins. For entertainment purposes only, I'm kind of hoping that comes through because that was an easy bet. Just not today. So we mentioned you get Wake Forest, then you get a Friday night game against Clemson, right? Which Syracuse has proven in recent years that they can play and compete with Clemson. Clemson's offense has been really struggling this year. The defense is great, but, Syracuse has been in a couple grinders this year. Syracuse can run the football, has a running quarterback, has a defense that can make stops. I'm going to pop in the scores here while we're chatting here. I believe Clemson played earlier this afternoon. You guys can go ahead and update me here while I'm looking it up. But generally, Clemson has not been Clemson this year. But let's see how they did today. I was so busy involved in the Syracuse game, I did not see that score. So Wake Forest did beat Louisville 37-34. We noted that. Where is that? Oh, so Clemson and BC are just underway as we're live here. So we'll see how that game turns out for Clemson. But that's 2 bangers in a row there for Syracuse. Then you go to Virginia Tech. So you're 3-2 now. Very easily could come out of that stretch with 3 more losses on the board, right? Especially if that Virginia Tech game ends up being at night. That is not an easy place to play at any time, but especially at night. You're home for Boston College. After that, we'll see how BC does against Clemson tonight. They're 4-0. They look pretty good. They lost their starting quarterback, Phil Dracovic. That's a home game. You go to Louisville after the bye week. At NC State is a top 25 team right now versus Pittsburgh. These are the games you got to win. These are the thin line games you got to put in your back pocket and get in league play in order to get to where you want to be and be in a bowl game, right? Rob notes the late bye week this year could be costly to Syracuse as the bumps and bruises mount. That's a great point. The Bean says, Brent, Syracuse beat Clemson once. Most Tiger SU games are lopsided. Not really. I mean, they beat Clemson once. The next year, that was a 27-24 game. I know that the Clemson game last year was lopsided, but Syracuse was only down a score in the third quarter of that game. They've at least proven that they can punch Clemson in the nose and compete with them, right? For all the hype and buildup that Clemson tends to get, not this year because they're a team, frankly, that shouldn't be in the top 25, even if they beat Boston College today. But they've shown they can hang, at least, and weird things happen on a Friday night, so we'll see about that. RJ says fans need to show up next week, and I believe we give Wake Forest a game. Look, I'll tell you what, the crowds have been pretty good at the Dome the last couple of games, particularly the students. Got to give the students a shout out. They've been showing up. I didn't think after the Rutgers loss they'd come back, but they have been, particularly for that Liberty game Friday night. I think they'll be there. I think they'll be jacked up and give that place an atmosphere, but that always matters, man. Wake Forest looks good. They look good. They're just a complete team. Sam Hartman's a great quarterback. They run the football, a defense that creates turnovers. They play clean football. What a great job Dave Clawson has done with Wake Forest. Kind of reminds me of that season Syracuse was building in 2018. 5-0 Wake Forest. They got a real push from Louisville today. And look, you're in league play. It's going to happen, but it's going to be a big, big swing game for Syracuse next week to get back here. And you got to go from losing to the worst team in the league to beating the best team in the league. Certainly not going to be easy. So let's look at some stats from this one, just to give you a perspective of how things went. Garrett Schrader passing the football was 13 of 23, 150 yards, had a touchdown throw. First time Syracuse has had 2 100-yard rushers in the single game. You go all the way back to last season, as a matter of fact. Notre Dame, season finale, both Sean Tucker and Cooper Lutz at over 100 yards rushing. Schrader with 137 yards on the ground, rushed for 3 touchdowns, including that 55-yarder. Sean Tucker, just over 100 yards, 24 carries, 102 yards, and he really had to earn it in this game. Love what I saw from Courtney Jackson today. Getting open, making some pop plays in the passing game. He didn't have Taj Harris out there again, as we noted. I think Courtney Jackson is starting to build a rhythm with Schrader, as is Anthony Quealy, who had 2 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown. Damian Alford had a couple of catches in this game, and you can see a real chemistry building between those two. So I think the passing game's got to improve under Schrader, but I think he certainly showed some signs today that will happen. Now, a couple things that went against Syracuse in this game, as you look at it, just overall, Syracuse kept the penalties down. Florida State had 3 penalties for 30 yards. They should have had 4 for 10, 4 for 40 yards, add 10 at the end at that hold that didn't get called, which was just brutal. Syracuse was 2 of 12 on third down. It's not going to help you in a game like this. Florida State, 6 of 15. All told, Syracuse ran 63 plays in this game for 389 yards. Florida State, 69 plays, 378 yards. A 9-yard difference in this game between those two. And you look at the score, you look at the back and forth in this one, that certainly tells you the tale. Jordan Travis came back out for Florida State. It had been Mackenzie Milton for a while here. What a great story that kid has coming back from the broken leg. 22 of 32, 131 yards, 2 touchdowns, some key runs on the last drive. Put aside the one that didn't get called with the hold. That guy had 58 yards rushing on the last drive after having, I think, like 56 the whole game. All told, ends up with 113 yards rushing. So both quarterbacks lead their team in rushing in this one. Trayshawn Ward had a 66-yard run in this game. Jashawn Corbin came in pretty hyped. Second leading rusher in the country in terms of yards per carry. Tucker's officially the second leading rusher in the country. Syracuse held him back. I think you got to be happy about that if you're the Syracuse defense, if he only gets 14 carries for 65 yards in this game. So there's a look at things statistically in that one. Scott notes that Taj Harris didn't like the game plan and made it clear, hence his stay in Syracuse. You know, he had an interesting tweet, and you never know with social media these days, but he tweeted a few days ago that I believe it was something along the lines of, I know my worth, right? So maybe there was some frustration there, maybe another. I don't want to speculate here because he did have an injury situation earlier this year, but it is curious that he played last week, didn't travel this week. I've not seen Dino Babers' press conference. I don't know if he's, not that he'll give us much detail on that, I would think, but I'll be curious to hear what the story with that is. But again, Courtney Jackson stepped up, Quealy stepped up, Alford, Aronde Gatson is a big target. Schrader's got some guys to throw to here. So the more confident he gets throwing the ball in that play action, throwing on the run, the better. Not that I don't want Taj Harris out there if he can be, but, you know, curious that this happened again. A couple of you speculating it could be maybe he's close with Tommy DeVito. I don't know. I mean, we're in a world of speculation here, and I don't want to get into that, but it certainly is really curious that he did not make the trip in this game, even with an injury earlier in the year. He played last week against Liberty. So look, you got to play with you got to roll with the quarterback who's out there, right? And Schrader's the quarterback now, and Harris, it could be huge in that play action game. Coming out of the slot, short passes, getting those yards after the catch, right? This would benefit him no matter who the quarterback is. But he's an emotional kid, as we saw last year. Unfortunately, gave the camera the bird in the Liberty game last year that Syracuse lost, and not afraid to speak out on social media. But again, I don't want to speculate here. We'll certainly give him his opportunity to, if he wishes to speak out about that, or if Dino addresses it, or how that goes in this point. A couple more comments from you as we go here. Nick saying that usually you see the backup with the starter talking things over. Tommy nowhere in sight. Yeah, I wish that the ACC network would kind of take that. What's the term I'm looking for here? The megacast approach, and just get a camera on the sideline at all times so we can see what the interaction is between the quarterbacks. What's the chemistry like? How is Schrader winning over this team? I mean, DeVito was an embedded guy, had been there for the past, 4 or 5 years and had a lot of close relationships on the team. The only thing Schrader could do to earn the team's trust was come out and earn it on the field. And I think today, even though they lost, he took a huge step towards doing that because they know it now. They can bank some confidence that he can make some plays, that he's willing to go out there, put it on the line, challenge defenders. They've seen it in practice, but haven't seen it in a game. Showing he can throw the football in certain situations. I'm still concerned if he gets in a real shootout and opposing teams, which Wake Forest is certainly capable of doing next week, shut down the run or slow down the run to the point where you got to throw the ball, to be successful consecutively. I'm still not there yet, but his grade's a lot better in this game than it has been in any of the games he's shown us so far, right? So Michael Antonio says, you tell me who Syracuse can beat going forward, as we were going through the schedule there. And look, football's football, as we were going through it before, and weird stuff can happen. But Wake Forest, Clemson, Virginia Tech, BC, Louisville, NC State, Pittsburgh. Those are your choices to get 3 more wins in 7 more football games, right? I wouldn't pencil in Wake Forest. I think it's possible they can beat Clemson, but I'm not going to predict that. I think they can beat Virginia Tech. I certainly think they can beat Boston College. I think Louisville will be a shootout of a football game. Certainly possible to beat them. NC State, not one I'd predict at this point. Pittsburgh, they absolutely can beat. So that answers your question. There you go. I'm sure by your comment there, you probably disagree with that. But, weirder things have happened, right? Michael says that last defensive drive, sigh. The one keeper where they didn't push them out of bounds and he gained another 20 yards, unacceptable. Yeah, the defense had a couple misfires today. Not falling on the fumble, that play right there. You got to finish plays. Now they're tired. It's Florida. It's Tallahassee, 88 degrees, humidity. You could tell they were certainly, really looking for, some sort of push in the end. They were tired fighting there, but you got to finish those plays. This is a defense that knows how to fight. They made the plays in the fourth quarter last week, didn't quite do it in the fourth quarter. This week, one of them, not their fault, of course, the bad hold that didn't get called. But, Michael, I'm glad you brought that up. That's for a defense that's made those plays all year long. That's one you certainly got to get. Let's see. Nick says every ACC team is beatable. Maybe steal one at home. Jeff says, Axe, what's your take on Coach? I think he lost the game. I think Babers had some very regrettable decisions in this game. And I have an instant observations post that goes up pretty much within 10 minutes of the game ending. Hope you guys can read that on syracuse.com. Always appreciate that. And, I was pretty harsh on Babers in that. And I think it's warranted. Blowing the timeouts, the fourth down calls. I wanted him to switch to DeVito. I was wrong about that. But the offense was clearly stalling. Why did they wait on the play action? Why did they wait, on the rollout plays? You shouldn't come out with that from the get-go to get Schrader comfortable in this game. Boy, I'm forgetting a few. You guys can fill in the blanks here on some things I'm missing here. But I think even if Syracuse had won this game, it's one of those, but I'm still a little skeptical of where the coach is at right now. The plays that I mentioned, not falling on the fumble, the awareness plays, that comes from coaching. Now, to their credit, the penalties have gone down dramatically in the last two games. They had 16 penalties against Albany. They have had 8 in the last two games combined. So, you got to give credit where it's due there. But Dino comes just short of validation in my mind. Now, he made the call to go to Schrader, right? And that's not an easy thing to do. Wasn't loyal to his guy that he recruited and had been along for the side, was going to be the heir apparent. Did it in pretty unique circumstances 2 hours before the game last week, gave Schrader the run this week. Obviously, Schrader's the guy now. So there are some things that Babers has done that I think are good, are favorable, but a lot of these in-game things and these timeouts and these clock management decisions how do they keep happening? Because these are patterns that keep repeating themselves in this point. I am not a fan of Sterling Gilbert. I will tell you that. I just have never been. I think he just I never get the impression that he comes out firing. This is a guy that goes back into the locker room after the game and he's got, half his bullets still in the chamber. And I just don't understand it. I don't know why he's not more aggressive. I'm pretty vocal in my criticism. They don't throw to the tight end enough. They did try the leak play to the tight end in the end zone to Max Mang, and Schrader overthrew him. And obviously Luke Benson is hurt right now, but just, in the past when you had tight ends to throw to, Aaron Hackett, Luke Benson in particular, as we mentioned, why did it take you a quarter and a half to figure out where Schrader's strengths are, right? I'm just not impressed with him at all. But my question is, and I've never really been able to kind of get to the heart of this because Dino does not allow his coordinators to talk to the media, which I think is ridiculous. I request coordinators pretty much every week just to kind of get it on the record that I want to talk to them. And to no avail, we have not heard. Sterling Gilbert could walk in this room right now and smack me in the forehead. I wouldn't even know who he is. I know who Tony White is. I have spoken with Tony White away from the media, if you will. But I think it's ridiculous that Dino does that. Why is he the lone spokesman for the program? But that's neither here nor there. But I'd like to ask Sterling Gilbert these things, but he's not made available to the media, which is very frustrating in that sense. But my question, though, is where is the disparity between what Dino calls and what he calls, right? Who's calling what? Who's putting the game plan together? And who's got the higher percentage and who does that? I still have a lot of questions that haven't been quite answered. about the disparity there. But let's just say I'm not impressed with Sterling Gilbert at all. So I don't know how much of the blame, if you will, you got to point towards him versus Babers, but ultimately Babers is the head coach and gets the brunt of it at this point, right? Al says that Schrader at this point, Dungy light, but first two series were pro-style set, wasted. And in a game like this, Al, it showed you cannot waste a possession. Breaks of the game going back and forth, and a game that came out of the last possession. All that added up. Missed extra point. Don't go for the field goal. Don't fall on the fumble. I mean, it all adds up there. But certainly, as a number of you have said, as Bean notes here, horrible call on Wax roughing the passer, good aggressive play. There was another one right there. I mean, why are you punishing Marlowe Wax for accidentally hitting somebody in the helmet? It was not an aggression play. And then he got held at the end, and they don't call that. Very frustrating. All you can ask for is a little consistency from the officials, just not when they're consistently bad in that sense, right? Rob with a good question here. How does Mike Schmidt help play into the identity of our offense and the decline of Tommy DeVito? For those of you not familiar, he's the new offensive line coach that Syracuse brought in. I think he has brought a real toughness to the offensive line, to the running game, the focus on Tucker. How he affects DeVito is a very good question, because that offensive line has had to make that adjustment all year. DeVito's in, it's a certain way. Schrader's in, it's another way, right? So you got to make that adjustment. But clearly we've seen the focus more towards Schrader, his traits, Tucker running the ball, and his traits. Schmidt, if you've ever seen him, he's an offensive line coach. he's a dude. Like, you see him, you're like, yep, you coach the offensive line, right? So more of a traditional sense there. And I think for the most part, he cleaned up some stuff on that offensive line. We mentioned the Tisdale injury, so we'll see how they adjust there. But that's a good question, Rob. But I would think it affected it negatively, obviously, given where things have gone and who the quarterback is now for Syracuse. Okay, what do you say we end right there? We will be back next week. Let me double check myself while we got the schedule open here. 3:30 kickoff next week. That is correct. Actually, they have not set the kickoff, but it's going to be either 3 or 3:30. The ACC is going to put the official game time out on Sunday. So one way or the other, we'll be here about the same time next week. Appreciate those of you joining us live. Appreciate that. If you missed it live after the game, then what you can do is you can watch it on YouTube. You can watch it on demand whenever you want, because this goes up on our Syracuse Orange Sports page on YouTube. So please follow that. I embedded in my recap. You'll see it on the social media. I sounded like my grandfather there. The social media. We'll put it on our Syracuse football Twitter page, my Twitter page at Brent Axe Media. So always appreciate those of you that come here live. But for those of you that can't make it live, then watch it on demand whenever you want. Thanks to Krause Health for sponsoring as always. So to wrap it up, folks, 3-2 is the record for Syracuse. Now they lose a heartbreaker to Florida State, 33-30, our final score. Thanks for watching tonight. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you again after the Orange take on Wake Forest next week.